Hi again, and you're back for the AAC series, so you can learn more about communication, learning, and inclusion with me, Amanda Hartman. And we just left off where we'd started our introduction and conversation about AAC for people with intellectual disability, and now this is part B of that video series. So we've been talking about communication and some of the questions as to when and why we might consider using some alternative tools to support communication development. And I wanted to start with some things that you might have seen, some really common communication tools that are often used, particularly for students or people with Down syndrome and or intellectual disability. So I thought it might be just a start, and you'll go, oh yeah, I've seen that before. So some of the really common communication supports that might be used for someone with an intellectual disability are picture cards or symbol cards or photo cards, anything that allows people to make choices or talk about the things that they like. They could be printed on a board, they could be little cards with Velcro in a book. You've probably all seen them because they are quite commonly used in the early phases of communication to help somebody make requests, make choices, say the things they like, they don't like, those sorts of things. So they can really kickstart someone's communication as their speech and language is developing. They're really good beginning points, and you'll see them often. I have a young person that had his little book of picture cards from when he was quite young, and he still quite likes it. So it's not something we ever threw away. We just added additional language through AAC later in the piece. But he still quite likes his little picture cards, and it's still something, he can go and grab a card and still use that if he's thinking about something in particular that he wants or that he's wants to go do. So you'll commonly see these kind of things as a communication support for someone who has difficulties with their speech and making themselves understood. Another thing that quite often happens are called picture boards or symbol boards, like a board that has the words. So you can see some examples here where like they might put all the words together to talk about when something's wrong or when they need help. It's a picture board with, words they need for particular activities that they like, and you can print them out on lots of things so they're usually like a printed symbol board. Again, it can be a really good kickstarter to communication to start giving somebody a few more of those picture supports to communicate more deeply about something. But again, they might only be starting points for communication. They might be things that work in the moment while we're playing this game or doing this activity or we're out and about, but they may end up needing additional tools on top of these. So I feel like that starting with some symbol cards, maybe some symbol boards, picture boards, these communication boards can be really good starting points, but you might often want to explore how can we add more language for this student so they can communicate more things, because it's the only words that can fit on it are what's printed on that one page, and they may run out of words, or the thing that they want to say isn't on that board, and so they get stuck when they're trying to communicate something different in the circumstance. So that you will see them. They can provide a useful support for communication for someone with a communication impairment, but it might not be the only solution in the long term to their communication. Another really common and popular communication strategy is the use of keyword sign. So it's not Auslan being the language of the deaf community in Australia. Instead, we call it keyword sign, and it's really designed as a communication support tool for someone with an intellectual disability. So keyword sign can be a way to help express themselves. It can be a way that they also get receptive comprehensive processing support, because the signs are there. We're going to eat some spaghetti, we want to have a cake, so we can add those signs to help enhance even the comprehension and reception for somebody with an intellectual disability. Now, keyword sign has been very common and popularly used for people with intellectual disability, and it is something that they can get started. The development for the gesture of signs using your hands and gestures and sign language actually is way earlier developing that and easier than sometimes the development of speech, and that's why it's such a useful tool. And keyword sign is again a lifelong communication tool. My friends that use keyword sign, they use those signs across their lifetime. They may add additional tools like AAC. And I guess the main thing with all these three tools is that if you are supporting somebody that comes to you that has some picture supports, has some symbol boards, has some picture cards, uses keyword sign, those things can still exist alongside other high-tech AAC that you might explore for the person you're supporting. You don't have to choose one over the other. All of these things and tools and the supports, they're all very useful. Okay, so there's not like we don't have to choose one over the other, because at different phases and stages of life, they will always have value and to support communication and learning. Obviously, we now need to talk more about the AAC tools and look at them more specifically about what they can add additionally to the other kind of communication things that you might have seen already. So let's get into that. So to help us understand that, I thought that I might give you some examples of some of today's AAC tools and how that can help, and how things, just like even in the last 5 years, but certainly in the last 10 years, how much things have changed and how useful AAC with its tricky little features can really help support communication and learning for someone with an intellectual disability. So as we mentioned before, we have printed paper-based things, and we also have the high-tech. And so I will show some examples of each of these. So the first thing is that all of the AAC, that's high-tech, that high-tech or electronic, has what's called speech output. So that means we can touch buttons and it speaks aloud for us.
This is an augmentative communication device, and I'm using it to help me speak.
So it has buttons like this, and you can program in anything to make it say anything aloud that you might need to tell a story, give an idea, or get help. Okay. Another really important thing that we want to recognize is that the technology has improved to a point where the quality of the voices of that speech output is really good. Let's listen.
Hello, I'm Liam.
Hi, my name is Lisa.
Hello, I am Olivia.
Hello, I am Tyler.
So I just let you listen to Liam, Lisa, Olivia, and Tyler, and those are the actual Australian high quality voices that are available in a lot of the AAC apps. And they are really genuine lifelike sounding, but they are electronic voices. They're not recordings. They are an electronic voice that you can make it say, type in words and make it say whatever you need it to say to meet your communication needs. And I think that that does make these things nicer and better to use because they sound better. The other big thing that we have had change, and I'm not, is that we have really now have a low cost entry point for getting your hands on AAC. So in the olden days, as I said, it's been nearly 30 years since I've been a speech pathologist. And in the first 10 years of my career, communication devices were up to $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, and they just were not accessible to most people. There are still high expensive AAC devices out there, and they are really much needed for kids with complex communication needs. But in a lot of cases, an iPad plus an AAC app can be purchased, and for around or just over $1,000 you can have an AAC tool ready to support communication and learning. So I think we're seeing more of this low cost entry point, meaning that we have a lot more accessibility to AAC, which for me as an AAC enthusiast is always a good plan. The other thing that we've seen a major shift in is the actual way the AAC tools or apps, programs that are available to us. They now really have a really large vocabulary of words, and that's really important because remember, we want to support language development for people with intellectual disabilities. So more words lets them learn more words, lets them build their comprehension, lets them tell stories, share ideas, because they need all those words to be able to do that successfully. We also have a lot of systems for trying to get easy access to the words we say a lot, or you being able to add and edit to put in. So we always say stop, we always say help, we always say eat. All these words that are the common words that we say day in, day out, like apparently, one of my words is awesome, my kids tell me. So, like I need to be able to have awesome all the time because I think that's an important word for me. So it's having access to frequently spoken words so that you can say the things that are important to you really quickly. We also want to be able to personalize AAC. So if they like PJ Masks or Doctor Who or Frozen or ABC for Kids and they have a repertoire of Disney characters that they need, then we want to personalize. We want to add those in, add photos, program them in so that the words that they most want to talk about are there, and that helps make it really interesting and motivating for them. I talked about having enough language, having a large vocabulary, and this is because remember we want all people to be able to have enough words to communicate for lots of different reasons, not just to ask for things, but also to tell jokes and start conversations and tell stories and give their opinion and express their feelings really well so they can get their needs met. I also think that an AAC now these days, they're starting to have some really good grammar supports in there. So as we're starting to write and read full sentences, then AAC can visually support how that grammar might look. And it can be great for writing and all that kind of learning side of things as well. I also think now we would not really have an AAC tool that does not have an alphabet in it. So we're all understanding that literacy development is still an important phase. And so to support the possibility of learning literacy for our people with intellectual disability, then having that AAC, an alphabet in the AAC that as you type and do letters, it tries to read the word aloud to you, or it does read the words and the letters aloud to you. That can really support literacy development. Sorry. Oh, he's going to say something.
L. Like it. I like it.
Yeah, so you get that speech feedback as you're as you're learning to type and spell as well. So overall, we're coming around to this idea. Okay, AAC has all these amazing things. It can do this, it can do that. What can't it do? Well, lots. But I want you to understand that AAC can be a bridge to learning literacy skills. It can be a way that can improve somebody's social interaction. AAC is amazing for help to solve problems. Solving problems for me is, I always think of a behavior. So if a child is demonstrating a behavior, that is really just a problem that we have not solved yet. And I think AAC gives us a way to communicate more clearly so we can solve those problems, so that people that are experiencing difficulty, dysregulation, unsettled behavior, difficult behavior, that we can just help solve their problem to get them the help they need. I also think that AAC is amazing for backing up speech that's hard to understand, or speech that's limited, or speech that sometimes they just don't want to speak. And all of these things means that they can participate in their community more. So I hope you're on the AAC train now. Hopefully we've had enough arguments as to why we might consider using AAC for a person with an intellectual disability. So when we look at this whole flower, let's call it my AAC flower that I've made for you here, I think that it's obvious to see, because of AAC's link to communication, which supports the literacy and the behavior and the social interaction and the speech and the participation, you can understand why AAC is being adopted in so many schools and classrooms around Australia. And I think Australia is in a place where we're seeing more and more AAC used with all students. than even in some other countries around the world. Trailblazers Australia, and I have travelled and seen other schools, and so I think Australia should be really proud of this inclusion of making AAC more available for students with communication impairments. So in particular, we're now seeing that many students with intellectual disability are getting access to AAC, and that's really helping their participation in communication in school. And that, remember, reminding us that AAC isn't just for those kids that are non-speaking or non-verbal. Even if kids do talk, teachers are starting to find that AAC can really still help in lots of other ways with their communication and learning. And we're going to discover and explore way more of that later. Remember, ultimately, if we have good communication and that communication is being supported by AAC, that can be the thing that allows us to develop connections and friendships. These two young men, quite often, they had quite a lovely comical relationships. You probably would say there's a lot of Three Stooges, gestures and actions and funny noises, but their friendship is stronger because the young man who has his iPad for communication, he can tell real stories and talk about them, tell jokes, and talk about movies that he's seen. And his speech might not have been able to do that for him, but having a communication tool did. We also are remembering that AAC is going to just be such an important part of how a person with a communication impairment can be heard and understood. And just finishing with a really nice quote. So Sidi and her son has an intellectual disability. As a parent, it can be really hard to see your child getting frustrated when we cannot understand what he wants to say. And I'm sure if you're watching this as a parent or a teacher or a therapist or anyone, you would understand that frustration. So we have been doing SLP sessions since he was 7 months old, and started using AAC when he was in kindy, with lots of use in home at school. So today this young man is in year 8, and he uses a combination of speech and AAC to share his thoughts. He uses his AAC to form a sentence, to access literacy at school, to share his weekend stories with his friends, and he's even starting to send text messages. He loves using technology and feels proud of himself. With the use of AAC, it has not only supported his communication, but his overall social participation and well-being. So I think that's a really nice quote to sort of wrap up that long-term use over a lifetime. Not a lifetime yet, he's only in year 8. Settle down, Amanda. But how this young man, participation in his school environment is really contributing because he has a way to successfully communicate. So this is the last part of our first block of videos that was really introducing AAC. But I know you've got more questions. You want to know, how am I actually going to get started with AAC in my school or in my classroom? What are the key skills that my teams and myself that I need to use, that I need to build and learn so that I can get AAC happening in the classroom? And then fourthly, could you please, Amanda, give us some practical ways to use AAC in the classroom? And the answer to all of these 3 things is yes. There are other videos that you will be able to watch in the time that you have to gain more skills and knowledge around AAC. So I look forward to speaking with you again soon. And my name's Amanda Hartman. It's nice to have met you, and I hope that you tune in for more of our AAC videos. Thanks very much. Bye.